Your alternative talk radio contact, The Planet, KGRAradio.com.
With infinite complacence, people went to and fro over the earth about their little affairs, serene in the assurance of their dominion over this small, spinning fragment of solar driftwood, which by chance or design, man has inherited out of the dark mystery of time and space.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Into the Fray. My name is Shannon LeGros. An exciting announcement. Into the Fray is now on Patreon. I will be phasing out Stripe on my site, so Patreon will be the way to go if you would like to sign up for Insider. Patreon is a wonderful platform that allows you to select which tier you want to pledge at, and of course each tier has its own rewards. For right now, I've got 4 different levels for you to choose from on Patreon. For right now, the most popular option seems to be the $5 monthly version. This one gets you access to the secret Facebook group, your own private RSS feed, the monthly live video hangouts, of course the added bonus material every month, ad-free episodes of the main show when applicable, and early access to the main episodes. And you guys can access all bonus content through the app or, of course, at patreon.com. So for more information, head to patreon.com and search Into the Fray. Just a quick side note for you yearly members over on intothefrayradio.com right now. If you guys have months and months left on your term, don't worry. Don't worry about canceling right now. I will continue to upload all bonus content to the website. So, that being said, I do encourage, especially the monthly members, go and cancel that out on Stripe through my website and join up on Patreon, as I will eventually, as I said, be phasing this completely off my website. And now a quick shout out to my new patrons. Darren, Dave, Joseph, Paul Bestall of Mysteries and Monsters podcast, Gary Bickley, who designed the Insider logo, Jeremiah Byron of the Bigfoot Society podcast, Nishi, Isis, Chris, Jason, John, Laura, Brett Manning of brettisagirl.com. She is a badass artist over there. You have to check out her very unique works. Jose, Leslie, Stephen, Mark Muncie and Carrie Schultz of Erie, Florida, Pam, David, John, and Eric. Thanks for the support, everybody, and hope to see you over on Patreon. So on this episode of Into the Fray, I am joined by a veteran. And this man emailed me, and I am excited. I am so excited to have him on this edition. And actually, we are going to be doing at least 2 episodes with this gentleman that we are going to call Mark. And he was kind enough to email me some very detailed things of what has gone on in his life. He does have some earlier incidents, which we will cover on edition 2. But for this edition 1, we are going to start at the point when Mark graduates high school. And I'm not going to like give out any locations right now. I'll wait to see how comfortable you are with that stuff because I forgot to ask you that on the onset. But Mark has joined the military, and it's 1987, and we're going to pick it up from there, and especially considering what you went through, Mark, just to get into some of these extremely sensitive positions.
Yes, Shannon, I appreciate being on your show. Thank you for inviting me on. As I said, I've had these episodes. I call them events, is what I call them, and I've had them since a kid. But, picking up when I joined the Navy, just to get what I got into, I became a missile technician on submarines. So missile technicians, they take care of the SLBM, Submarine Launched Ballistic Missile Program, what they call boomers or missile submarines. So it's a nuclear weapons platform. So the qualifications part to even get into that program is very serious. So I depth and delayed entry program, in my senior year, where so you had a recruiter monitor. Back then, 25 years ago, recruiters actually got a little bit of money for finding guys like me. I qualified. You take what you call the ASVAB, and it gives you 4 special scores, and they add them together, decide what programs you qualified. I qualified for anything I wanted, but I had to take a test for the nuclear engineering part, which that is the best program you can get in the Navy. But I just missed that by a few points, but got the next one down, which was for nuclear weapons, which was called the SWASI, or Strategic Weapons Systems Electronics Program. And this is in 87. So to get into that program, like I said, was required a heavy background check, which was done by the FBI defense investigators. So they didn't really start the background check until you actually went into boot camp, and that's the period when they started vetting you. So you had to give them 10 names, family and friends. I think it was 5 family, 5 friends. It's been 25 years ago, so it's hard to remember that far back. But what they would do is they go interview them, and they would back then they would interview them in person because they didn't have no internet like they got now. I mean, they had databases, but no internet. And then they go, well, who else did he know? And that's how they would really dig up if there was any dirt on it, because they don't want just anybody being able to work on submarines and nuclear weapons and having these type clearances.
Right.
So that by going to a second set of names, and then asking them, hey, what's this guy's characteristics like? What did he do? Where did he hang out? Did he do any drugs? Did he drink anything? So that's how they would qualify you. If you passed all that, and that usually when you got, so it was a long pipeline. It was 1.5 to 2 years of heavy training qualifications before you got to your first submarine. So usually once you got, during submarine school, but by the end of submarine school, that's when you're completely vetted. We've actually had guys in submarine school that would get pulled out by these investigators, and you just wouldn't see them again. They were gone. Mm. So that means they found something in their background they didn't like, and there you went. So once you made it to your next phase, which is, I think they still call them Navy A schools. So that's like a preliminary school. And then you had your C school. So your A school was the heavy electronics part, and then your C school was more focused on the missile technician, actually taking care of the launcher system and the missile and the weapon itself. So that's kind of how my background, as far as the Navy is concerned, how serious it was to get those kind of security requirements. And what you would get is what they called they would qualify you all the way up to top secret SCI, which is secret compartmentalized information. And that program was started, I think, around 84, 85. There was a guy named Chief Johnny Walker that, he was stealing secrets and selling to the Russians. This was during the Cold War, of course, because I joined under Reagan. And he actually got his son involved, too, when he joined the Navy, and they were both stealing secrets. So when that happened, things really, they really clamped down on information. So it seems like prior to 85 or so, that if you had a clearance, you could have access to quite a bit of information. I wouldn't say all information, but at least a lot more than that. But now they only give you, what you need to know. So SCI means, what you need to know for your job. So you have to be read in for a particular program. And it's so serious. I mean, I tell people, when people say I have top secret clearance and I knew all this, I said, well, then you really didn't have a clearance, because you're not allowed to have all that information. So, and plus, who wants the responsibility of having all that information in your mind? So you would really just wanted what you needed to know to do your job. So that's, the credibility and as far as the security of doing this job was very serious to work on a nuclear weapons platform on a submarine.
Yeah, I like that part. I highlighted that part where you said anyone who says they have a top secret clearance and has access to everything is just flat out lying. So, yeah, like you said, maybe way back in the day that was true, but not anymore.
No, it's a very, very serious thing. So, like I said, I was having these events. So, at this point as a child, and this is 86, I haven't heard, I don't even think Art Bell was on. There was no conspiracy thing, except for, what was the guy that did the initial Sasquatch? What was that show in the 70s with the guy that played Spock? Can't remember. Leonard Nimoy.
Yeah.
Leonard Nimoy. Yeah. Yeah, and with the exception of that, there was really no conspiracy things on there to really watch. You only had 3 stations on your antenna, so you didn't have a lot of things to fog your mind. So I was having these events, and I couldn't really call them, hey, I'm being abducted by aliens or anything like that. I just knew they were scary events, sleep paralysis, felt like something was in the room. You know, it was that kind of thing. So I just chalked it up to bad childhood dreams. So you took these written exams to further qualify with the psychiatrist. And sometimes you see a doctor. I'm trying to remember. I think I saw at least one. But you take these tests, and it basically asked the same questions, just different ways over and over. You take 3, 4 tests, and I think they were looking for ways to make sure you're going to be not only okay working with the weapon system, but being on a submarine, period, that kind of thing. So I obviously didn't put down there, I think I'm being abducted by aliens. Well, I didn't even know what that was, so that's why I passed that process. I discussed, hey, I had nightmares as a kid. But and then the other big thing the Navy is really worried about is, and this is just for the general clearance for submarine, period, or maybe even for the Navy, is sleepwalking. You can't have people sleepwalking because that could cause OPSEC problems. You know, if you're sleepwalking, if you're asleep like anywhere, you could fall asleep. Say you're at the bar or you're in a restaurant, and your mind just falls asleep. You can say things that you shouldn't be saying. So long as all that stuff is gone by 12, I mean, including even physical problems, asthma, those ailments, all those gone by 12, yet they usually let you through. It's no problem. So by that point, I was fully qualified, and I was on my way to my pipeline school. And when I got to A school, and I was still having these, what I call events. Just sleep paralysis, having them occasionally here and there, but not that bad.
And I don't know if you want to mention this just as a kind of a teaser for episode 2, and we'll obviously go into detail more about this, but you, in fact, were having sleepwalking events that you mentioned that, at the age of 12, as long as it stops by then, which it did for you, then you were okay to go on a submarine. But let's just say that your parents found you in highly odd places in the home, right? So that's why, that's why we're kind of touching back on he keeps saying the word events, guys.
Again, they never caught me sleepwalking either, so they never actually caught me sleepwalking. They just found me in odd places.
Right. Yeah, so let's talk about missile technician, submarine time. Where was this? Was this program in Florida then, or is this somewhere else? I'm looking at my paper, but I don't see exactly where this was.
So yeah, I mean, things have changed in the last 25 years. I think all the schools are through Kings Bay and Bangor, Washington, which is where the bases are for the Ohio-class submarines. But back then, the pipeline worked if you went to Chicago at the Great Lakes for boot camp, and then you went to submarine school in New London, Connecticut, which was 2 to 3 months long. And then if you're in the SWASI program, and I'm going to break the SWASI program because at the time you could be 3 different rates, which were all related to the missile program. It could be electronics, NAV-ET, like electronics technician, or you could be a fire control technician, ballistics, or they call that FTB, or missile technician. So it was based on the needs of the Navy, how well you did in your school pipeline. And then you got to fill out what you call a dream sheet because there were several places you could be stationed. I mean, Scotland and Charleston and even Kings Bay because of the new D5 Trident system was coming online. So a few people got that. So that's how the pipeline worked. So my A school, I was in Damnick, Virginia. They called it Naval Guided Missile School. Virginia Beach, beautiful place to go to school. I think even the SEAL teams train there, and because I know there's a Marine base. I can't remember the name of it that's close by. And there was a rate called OS. And you have to forgive me, I don't remember what that was, but it was something for, ships where, some kind of, where they keep track of things and, what's going on in the air and at sea. But I know that school was there, but one of the main schools was Naval Guided Missile School. And then after you graduated from that, so this was I should back up. This was a 6-year billet because it took so long to get you through school at the time, 2 years. They wanted 4 years out of you in the fleet. So you signed up for 6 years.
Right.
So and the other part of the thing is if you graduated A school, you got a bonus. I think it was around $1,500, which was quite a bit of money back in '87. And then another thing is they automatically advanced you to E4. So if you're an E2, you just skipped right over E3 and right to E4. I mean, some people, because they were on ROTC and boot camp, were E3. But anyways, you got advanced to E4 right out of A school. And then I picked a billet for the old Poseidon C3 system, which was considered one of the harder systems to learn because these the fire control system, the launcher, they were all built back in the late 50s and early 60s when they conceptualized for the original, what they called the Polaris missile program. And then it was upgraded to the Poseidon C3, which I was trained on in the early 70s. So it was a pretty difficult school to get through. And once you got throughout school, like I said, it was 1.5 to 2 years, depending on when you classed up. Then I finally got to my first submarine. But during my training, as far as these weird dreams, these events, it just happened occasionally during this 2 years at Virginia Beach.
Now, Mark, just really quickly before we get on to that a little bit more, what made you want to be on a sub versus work with nuclear weapons on land?
Well, my father was an engineer, so I grew up in Florida, and he worked on the space shuttle out there. So he was part of, in the very first launch. So he was what they call a metrologist. He had a mechanical engineering degree, so he actually worked on all the gauges in the cockpit. He would certify all the gauges. So I was always interested in rockets, and I actually wanted to be a pilot too. But like most, or I shouldn't say most, but some knuckleheads, I did very well in school. But around my junior year, started dropping out of some of the advanced classes. Didn't do so well. My dad was trying to get me into the academy for the Army. Matter of fact, he had political connections. He was trying to do that. But by the time I got a girlfriend and my grades started dropping a little bit, he just said, "Well, you're going to the military." So all of a sudden, he's inviting all these recruiters over to my house. Going Army and Air Force had a 2-year waiting list. But this Navy guy came on, he was really easy to talk to. And when he said, you want to launch rockets and then submarines, it just, something kicked into my brain. I'm like, that's what I want to do.
Yeah.
I just knew right then that was going to be my career.
I think it's a wonderful choice. I also like the water, but it is interesting how, I don't know how much more testing you guys have to go through just because of the fact that you're stuck in a tin can under the water with nowhere to go, and if something goes bad, it goes really bad. As far as somebody mentally, if they snap, obviously it's not a good thing. So how much more of the scrutiny were you guys under because you chose subs versus any land work?
Well, so the sub school program was the main weed out program. So I'm not going to say this is like the Navy SEALs where 80% of people got thrown out. Certainly wasn't like that. But so you would go through trainers. You go through a flooding trainer where they had a mock-up engineering space, and they taught you how to do all these damage control methods in there. Pipe patch kits and turning valves and tightening up flanges. So they basically just flooded the thing. And since I grew up in Florida and I was a surfer, that was my favorite trainer. I'm like, bring all the water you want. Man. I'm swimming
so
on the platforms.
That didn't stress you out at all. You're like, I'm a water rat. Let's do this.
Didn't stress it out. But a lot of people that join the Navy don't know how to swim. So when they get to boot camp, they figure that out. And I think they call it, you have to be a minimum, I might be wrong, and everybody's going to say he doesn't know what he's talking about. But I think they call it a Class 3 swimmer. Basically, you kind of knew how to swim. So they would teach you in boot camp. But people that didn't know how to swim, that trainer would usually weed you out. So the first time we did the flood trainer, we lost 3 guys that day. And 2 guys, they had to physically go down there because they were so scared. They had to pull them up the ladder to get them out of there. And submarines is completely volunteer. They ask you, do you want to be on submarines at least 10 times? It's volunteer. It's not mandatory. So anytime you can opt out.
Right.
So we lost some guys there. And then we had the fire trainer. That's the one that scared me the most. And I've been in some fires on board an actual submarine. Usually have some kind of small fire incident almost every single patrol. So they train you for that. But the fire trainer was really scary for me because what they did is they just stuck you in this big metal tube at the time. I think it's a little bit more advanced now, but at the time they set some oil on fire and had what they call a thermal imager so you can see where the fire is because it's smoky, you can't see anything. And then they show you a melted fire hat, and they say, if you stick your head up, this is what's going to happen to you. So this is real. I mean, if you stand up, you're going to get hurt for real. So they throw you right into it. They teach you how to do it properly, how to do a hose team. You have one guy that's a leader and 2 guys with hoses, and then one guy with tap you on the shoulder in a manner to show you how to sweep where the fire is. The leader usually had the thermal imager so he could see the fire. That one scared me the most, but I made it through that one. And then they had the dive, they had the mock-ups of the control rooms on hydraulics. So you got to see what it was like to be on an actual submarine going up and down and hearing all the sirens going off and the alarms, just to see how that affects you. But the only one I saw that we lost people was in the flood trainer.
Yeah, I could imagine that would definitely separate the ones that really can hack it at that point, is feeling like you might drown. And can you figure it out or can't you?
Yeah. Not only do you got to know how to swim, but you got to be able to save the ship.
Right.
And that gets more into when you get to the boat, the process of what we call qualifying in submarines, where you get a little pin that looks like an aircraft wings. It's called submarine dolphins. So even though you go through all this 2 years of training, when you get to the boat, you're called a nub, a non-useful body. So you receive all this great training, and you've done well in school, and you think you know a lot, and then you get to the boat, all of a sudden you don't know nothing.
You're back at the bottom again.
So right back at the bottom. So, yeah. And everybody lets you know, too. They don't let you watch movies. They don't let you do much recreational time. It's qual, because if you can't save the ship, you're not really useful. You're just taking up oxygen, is what they say, wasting oxygen.
This is way off topic, but is there hazing for the nubs, or or do they not?
Back then there was quite a bit of hazing, and I think it calmed down over a period of time. It probably started in World War II. So for training for me, like I would sit. So we had this is a lot of information, but you had it's called a sea dad, and then you were a sea pup. So you had a guy that basically he was in your division. In my case, I was in the missile division, and it's his responsibility to help me get through the qualification process. So I remember sitting at a launcher, and he'd be asking me questions about certain valves or electrical panels and what they do. And if I got it wrong, he literally hit me in the chest with a wrench. So you learn real quick. Now they don't do stuff like that anymore, obviously. But there was all kinds of hazing, which I'm not going to go into because it gets it's sailorish, whatever you think about sailor, it was kind of going on.
Right.
But yes, there was quite a bit of hazing back then. But I know the Navy's done a good job of toning that down. They have a completely different program now. But when you got your dolphins, when you finally qualified, and it was very hard to qualify, you went into a board with it was usually one officer, a chief, and a couple petty officers, usually system experts. And your board would be about 2 hours long, and they would ask you. Any question on the boat was open, and it could be any room, any system. You had to draw hydraulic systems or the air systems, or you might have to draw how the water got tank to tank. Anything. So it was 2 hours long, but to you, you're so scared and wanting to answer it right, it felt like 10 minutes. And then it's over with, and then either you passed or you didn't. And if you passed, you got your submarine qualification pin, and it's probably one of the. Besides, having your kids and getting married, of course, it's one of the proudest things I've ever accomplished, getting that submarine qualification pin.
Oh, I bet. Well, Mark, let's move to your first submarine, and this is 1989, right? And let's talk about the difference between, these quote-unquote dreams that you were having, as far as when they would happen, when they wouldn't happen, and what were some of, the things going on around that time for you and that first sub that you were on.
So this is when I first picked up. Because you when you have a problem like sleep paralysis, which is very scary, so you could just go into what psychiatrists would call it, just that. I mean, I want to leave the alien abduction thing out of it right now, but you worry about it because it's very scary. So one thing on the boomer missile boats, you did 3 months on and 3 months off. There was a gold and a blue crew. So what I noticed is when I was not on the submarine, I would have these dreams, but there was kind of because when I first got to the boat, I lived in the barracks. But as I advanced in rank, I was able to rent a room off base. When I lived in the barracks, I didn't really have these bad dreams or events. But when I lived off base, I did. I started having the dreams, and they started escalating a little bit more at this point. But the weird thing was, when I was at sea or on the boat, or even on watch on the boat when it was tied up to the pier, nothing ever happened. So I started putting this together. At this point, it was just like things make you go, you're just trying to, this is kind of weird. Why does it happen when I'm not on the boat? When I'm on the boat, I mean, it happens when I'm not on a boat, but when I'm on the boat, it doesn't happen at all.
Right.
So that's where I started putting it together. And of course, the story gets a little bit better after that.
Now, this next section is going to make the UFO and USO buffs extremely happy. And of course, a USO is an unidentified submerged object for anybody that doesn't know. So this was in 91 or 92, you say? And you guys had a very strange event happen.
I think it was 90, 91. Yeah, maybe it was 91, 92. Yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we're on a patrol. I think it was like my 4th patrol at this point. And I knew this, I'm not going to say his name, but so I did qualify sonar because you keep qualifying. Just because you get your dolphins doesn't mean, so you qualify all these different watch stations. So for missile division, you'd qualify, first you had security watch or rover to launcher assistant operations supervisor, and then you're the launcher supervisor. And then you can go up to a qualified chief of the boat, depending on your rank. And there was just all kinds of, and I got bored of that, and I qualified broadband operator and sonar. So I got to know the sonar guys pretty good. So I remember this one patrol, they were hearing the sound. They started going throughout the boat. Hey, sonar's been picking up on something, and they don't know what it is. I mean, it comes in real fast and it goes away. They've actually triangulated a couple times. It's here and it's there. But, at that point it got hush-hush. It got compartmentalized. So only the sonar tech and the officers knew about it. Of course, we're all digging for, like, come on, tell us something. They went to, so I remember the captain for a while. He changed, course a couple of times. Was trying, because I'm sure they were trying to record it, determine if it might be some new Russian submarine or device of some type. I'm sure that was the biggest concern. But the speed that this thing was moving, and I guess the type of sound, which I was never told what it was. I remember that, it was just a big thing on the boat. And at this time, that movie, Hunt for Red October, and this is going to sound dumb. Submariners watch submarine movies underway. It doesn't make sense. But we were watching the Hunt for Red October, so you had the guy Jonesy that picked up the, that silent missile submarine, what was the actor's name? Played captain on that. I can't remember his name. Yeah, but he picked up because, it had a hum to it. Sounded like an earthquake. So, and then they called that sonar tech Jonesy. So we started calling this poor guy that was telling the captain about all this. We started calling him Jonesy.
That's his new name.
Mainly just because we couldn't, they wouldn't tell us anything. Well, what is it? Because, you want to know, but, like I was saying with operational security, when something like that happens, they limit how many people know and can hear what's really going on. Yeah, we did have an incident, and that's not the first time the Navy's had things like that. I mean, it was back in 71, the Trepang, USS Trepang, I think they were at periscope depth up in the Arctic, and they saw an object go in and out of the water that was like triangular shape. I know they've had activity down in Bermuda area, and I think Commander Fravor even mentioned that as well. And you see weird things at sea. You see things that go in and out of the water. You can't explain them. So was it an alien spacecraft underwater? Who knows? It might have been some kind of Russian weapon that they probably did figure out years later and classified it. Don't know. But I remember it was a big hype, when that was going on.
But at the time, though, because something you put in the email to me was that this wasn't any kind of biologics or mechanics from basically a man-made ship or submarine. Like at the time, that was the assumption of like what it couldn't have been, right? So that's why it was so interesting.
Yeah, we were able to get that out of the gentleman I was talking about. I did get that information. He said it doesn't sound mechanical like a propeller or clanky, because you can really broaden the sound. I mean, I don't want to get into the how the sonar systems work, but you can do things to see if it's man-made or not. And that was one thing they said, it just doesn't sound man-made. And it didn't make sense how fast it was going from spot to spot. They said it was like a hum that would come in and it'd go away just as fast. So, I mean, he talked to me because we were friends, but again, he didn't tell me much more than that. I mean, I would love to know everything about it, but at the end of the patrol, all this kind of stuff gets wrapped up in a report and goes to the submarine squadron and then goes off to the Pentagon, and those guys figure it out from there, what it is and what it wasn't.
Now, as far as something biological, and forgetting for a second that it was moving that fast, because that doesn't sound like any creature that we know of that's underwater. What does your sonar look like for, say, a massive great white or something like that? Does that even get picked up somehow?
So the underwater is alive, and the main thing you hear is the clicking of shrimp in the background. So you just got to get used to learning that, and then you learn to listen to the sounds behind the clicking of shrimp. But yes, you can hear whale song, and you can hear dolphins squeaking on planes. So the Navy learned a lot about. I mean, I could do a 2-hour show sonar and how we got the advance on this. Because we were what they call the deep sound channel. Because by learning what animals do with sound, we was able to learn it too. Then we learned when you make a sound, it goes it like a pond. When you throw a stone in the water, it propagates out. Well, it also propagates down. And then when you get 2,000-3,000 feet underwater, again, I don't know the exact, but there's what they call the deep sound channel. And we set up what we call SOSA nets, or listening stations, all up the Atlantic seaboard and all through Europe and the Mediterranean. And then something that happened, up in the North Atlantic, and it would go down the deep sound channel, and we could triangulate it and hear it from literally 3,000 miles away.
That's amazing.
And all this was learned basically just learning from how animals communicate, and biologists are still studying how whales and dolphins, talk underwater.
Right. Well, let's move to 92, 93. You said is around this happened, and this wasn't like a huge thing that you outlined, but you were deployed on this particular submarine, and then these quote-unquote events that we're going to cover on Edition 2, they, of course, were still happening, but, not on the ship, like usual, not on the sub, just occasionally when you were at home, right? So I don't know how much more you could really say about that without touching on the events that we're going to say for Edition 2, but if you want
to... Well, at this time, so these submarines were called the 41 for Freedom. They were all built in the 60s. So they were built, because of the Cold War, and they were starting to decommission at this point. So on the second submarine, we combined crews. I mean, I think I did one patrol on it, one regular patrol, then we combined crews, and then we were just at sea quite a bit. And eventually we took it through the Panama Canal and took it around to Bangor, Washington, and that's where they decommissioned all the submarines and they cut them up. They called it the Submarine Recycling Program. But the event stopped because I was on the boat. I was either on watch when the boat was, tied up, or I was at sea. So things slowed down. So it was just another thing. Again, I'm not staying away from the alien abduction. Just the sleep paralysis wasn't happening for whatever reason. Can't figure it out.
I find that extremely fascinating that it wasn't happening, and not just when you were literally underwater on the sub. Even like you said, tied up at the dock, it still wasn't going on. That's fascinating.
Yeah. Slept like a baby. I mean, loved it. I mean, and it, like I say, as I progressed in my career, which we'll get into that, I mean, it got really bad at one point. Mm-hmm. So,
all right, yeah. So progressing on, in fact, so we're going to go to the end of 1993, and this is Kings Bay, Georgia.
Right. So yeah, I get to what they call a submarine tender, USS Canopus. So they had tenders for the 41 for Freedom boats because. My first patrols were out of Hoylake, Scotland. They had patrols out of Rota, Spain, and out of Guam. So they would put these submarine tenders there, and the boats would pull up beside that. And these ships were capable of, you could pull the missiles out of the sub, put them in the missile magazine there, and you can do deeper repairs that you couldn't do on the boat. And they also had machine shops. They can make literally just about anything the boat needed. For far as engineering or like any part of the weapon system, the torpedo system, you name it. I mean, they were fully able to refit a submarine. So they would spend 2 weeks refitting a boat, and then you go out on patrol. So in Kings Bay, I was on the ship, not as much. So the events started to pick up there because I was living, in a house out at the back gate, and at this point, I had some guys that I was responsible for. So I would always tell them, hey, instead of drinking and driving, because they would, they'd pull you over base, and that would be a career ender. I always tell them that I left my door open. I said, come in the house. There's blankets on the couch. So I'd wake up on a Saturday morning, have a bunch of sailors on the floor, which I didn't mind. That it was a responsible thing to do. I mean, my poor, my son, I got pictures of him where I got a bunch of sailors trading baby feeding him. So he was raised by a bunch of sailors. So,
I like that. That's such a family
I spent a lot
feel.
of time at home. Yeah, what'd you just say? I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
Oh, no, I was just saying that's such a family feel. That's very nice. And, Mark, before I forget, during that time when you'd have, guys just showing up at the house and crashing on the couch or in the living room, would the events still happen on those particular nights?
Shannon, I have never thought about that till you said something about that. Boy, I would probably have to say no when they were there. But my wife at the time, it would happen. So
right.
I don't know if it was something, a person. I mean, I've read something about there's delta wave devices I don't know if that's the right word, that, can make people sleep. And that's why it's, if you get into the conspiracy side of this,
right.
That's how they put people to sleep, to do whatever they do, if it's our government or aliens or whatever. But no, that's a good question. I've never really thought about that. But it did pick up there because the submarine tender at the time, because things were starting to decommission, it was basically shore duty. I was at home quite a bit. So it was only when I was on duty on the ship that it didn't happen. But I'm thinking it probably didn't happen when I had the guys over on weekends too. Good question. Just never crossed my mind.
I don't even know why that popped in my head, but I just was imagining all those guys kind of just traipsing in, probably at goodness knows what time, and if they were just obviously they came over because they were drinking and you didn't want them driving, but I wonder if anybody ever noticed anything. Anyhow, I don't know how much you want to talk about this portion that you put in there, but about, your late wife and how that did affect your career a little bit there for at least a little while. I didn't know how much you wanted to cover on that.
Well, that's another thing I didn't cover about this. And this program is specific to if you work on nuclear weapons. They might use it on a couple other programs, but I know this is for Air Force, Navy. Anybody who worked on that type weapon, you're in this program, and they call it the Personnel Reliability Program. You can look it up. It's on Wikipedia. And what does it monitors all aspects of your life. So it doesn't matter who's in charge or who's not in charge. We're all kind of supposed to be monitoring each other, and we're supposed to. I mean, it's like tattletaling, but it's for the weapon system. The security of the weapon system is the main goal. So this program's put in place so we can make sure we got the best people in the right mind working on the weapon system. So if you had a financial problem or you had a problem with your wife, which I'll tell about that a little bit, you had to work that out. So they would actually pull you. Couldn't work on the weapon system itself. They'd pull you off, and they would put in a plan in place, and you'd have to work through this plan to get back into the PRP. So at this point, my wife, she was diagnosed with bipolar, so I'm not going to go into the specifics, but it did cause a problem to where I got pulled out of the PRP. So at this point, this is where the neat stuff started. Well, I call it neat. Where I started to put more together, because this point is like 93, going 94. I remember taking trips to Florida to go home, see family, and my dad always listened to AM radio when I was growing up, so I was an AM radio guy, and that's when I picked up on Art Bell, and it might have been a couple other guys, and that's the first time I started hearing about, alien conspiracies and stuff like that, or UFOs. So, it's just interesting at the time. I'm starting to pick that up, put that in the back of my mind. So I had to go to marriage counseling because that was part of my plan to get back, and my wife had to go see a psychiatrist, which they did get that fixed up and take care of. So I went to counseling, and so I never told too many people about these events, period. It just kind of, another thing is that I just put them as nightmares. I didn't really think that they were anything special. But when I heard Art Bell talking and hearing some of this UFOs, I'm like, your mind starts to think, I wonder if it is alien abduction. It could be. Who knows? So I couldn't believe I even said it because this lady could report back anything I said to my command as part of getting back in the program. But she was a civilian. She was off base. But I mentioned to her, I just took a chance because it bothered me so much because they started to escalate, like I said, because I was at home more. And I asked her what she'd think, and she goes, absolutely, I've been studying that phenomenon myself. And she started going, and then she recommended the book Communion, which is a famous book. It came out in the 80s. I can't remember the author now either.
Whitley Strieber.
Whitley Strieber, yeah. She actually had the book there there at the office, so she handed it to me to read. Yeah, she gave it to me to read. So I go home and read that, and it just blows my mind. And then Then all of a sudden, instead of a nightmare, I'm being abducted by aliens. I just convinced myself that that's what it was. So I had several more sets. So she mentioned she does regressions, or what do they call when they put people under sleep? I just call them regressions.
Yeah, they do like a form of hypnosis basically on you. But yeah, like hypnotic regression. Yeah.
So, I mean, there was two reasons. A, if it was real, I didn't want to know. And the other thing was operational security. I didn't want to be put to sleep, and then I say something, some secrets of the boat or the weapon system. That was another reason why I declined.
Right.
Obviously, I mean, that's just the smart thing to do. But the scariest thing is what if you go into regression and you find out some kind of weird stuff is happening, whatever it is. It doesn't mean it's aliens. Could be government related, could be who knows.
Yeah, and either way, do you really want to know? Yeah.
And then the next thing is if you found out, say what it is, how do you approach your command at that point? How do you tell the Navy? They're going to throw you right there. They're going to say, you're gone. You're out of here. So I thought at that point it was just, I mean, obviously talking with her, the talk radio starting to pick up and reading that book, it just put my mind completely in a different place. So, I mean, that's a good thing to mention because now instead of just being nightmares and not really know what it is and probably a scientific explanation, now I'm throwing in the conspiracy part of it, if you will.
And just a quick teaser for everybody, there was some physical evidence that we will cover on edition 2 that was present on Mark. So that is something that, again, we're going to talk about very soon. So it wasn't just, these quote-unquote dreams and events. There was some physical stuff going on with him. So got through that portion of it. And then if you would, go through that next portion that you wrote for me. The NOTU, your classifications and things like that, and however much you want to talk about those launches and stuff, because I think that's really cool to mention.
So I found out about this place because they pulled into Cape Canaveral when I was on the Grant. So I mentioned my boat. That's okay. So I pulled into Cape Canaveral. I'm like, wow, I recognized it because I grew up surfing there. I'm like, this is Cocoa Beach. I didn't even know the Navy had a command. So I just made it. Once I found out what the place was and what type of work they did there, I'm like, I'm going there. And I did everything I could to get there. I spent an extra 2 years at sea. I got the best evals I could because they only accepted the best of the best there, at least at the time. The place was called Naval Ordnance Test Unit. And it was so hard to get there. It was a joke. I mean, you can look how it's phrased. We would say, not you. That's how hard it was to get in. So it's, you can find it on the internet. If you Google No 2 in Navy, you can find a Facebook page. And I think the 45th Space Wing of the Air Force might have, because it's a tenant command of the 45th Space Wing. But there's not a lot about No 2 on the web. But what their job is to convert the rockets that are on the missiles. It's basically like the Titan. They call it a rocket when it's got a manned caps on top, but when it's in a silo, it's called a missile, if you get what I'm saying. So it's a 3-stage rocket, the Poseidon and Trident. Well, the Trident missile is 3-stage, the Poseidon was 2-stage. But these are rockets that go into space off of submarines. It's hard for people to envision, but that's what they do. That's where the warheads are deployed. So what we would do is we would convert the rockets. We put tracking and destruct pads on there so we can track where it's going and we can blow it up in case, it went into Orlando somewhere, which did happen in the early days of Cape Canaveral. That was with all the rockets. They said, I talked to the old guys out there. They said they had rockets flying everywhere until they got the destruct systems. They said it was just bananas out there. So, yeah, that's a whole nother story. But, yeah, so it was like, if you would, it's like, for missile technicians, it was like Top Gun. I mean, certainly a ET, like I said, there was ETs and FTBs and that was in the SWAT that they could get there too, but it's mostly missile tech. So it was like, so this was the dream job I had. So I get here and start going. You have to go through a training course to learn how to convert the rocket to make it into what you call a launch candidate. So obviously they pull the warheads off, wherever the boat comes out of Bangor, Washington or Kings Bay. And then we put test gear on top. We have the certain instrumentation. I don't want to go into classifications of that. I got to be careful. But we instrumentated out. That's why it's called an instrumentated launch candidate. So at this command, I worked my way up from being a team member, conversion technician, to a launch set operator, to an instrumentation launch supervisor. So the neat thing about this job is you're basically, I mean, not basically, you are doing what the launch crews do for any, like the shuttle or the Delta program out there, any of those programs out there. You're running a small launch set, and you're looking for certain parameters, and you can either stop the launch or you let it progress. So it's I think I was 28 when I qualified as a supervisor. So 28 years old, I'm launching rockets into space. I'm responsible for the safety of that submarine, the crew, and the safety of launching a rocket on the range. I mean, that's something. So when you look at 28-year-olds now, if you're 28 out there, I just want to point out, this is what you can do in the military. And this is just one instance. And not to mention all the things that's been going on in the last 20 years. We've been over Afghanistan and Iraq. The military is definitely an exciting place to put your dreams together if you want to consider that option as a career. So if you can look up Trident missile launch on YouTube, and you can see the missile come up out of the water, and it lights off pretty quick. And when you launch the missile on the boat, the whole boat feels like it's coming apart for a few seconds. It shakes really violently, and it's really scary because the thing's right behind you. Everybody else, they're 3 miles away from their rocket. Ours is like 2 feet behind us.
That is so freaky. I just have to say that.
Yeah, we got the little... Go ahead.
Oh, I was just saying that's really freaky to have it right there.
Yeah, it's. The only thing, I've never bungee jumped, but I think it's probably like that because it
I would say it's probably scary. A little more scary than that, Mark. I don't know. It's a nuclear weapon. You said that during this time that your events escalated quite badly. And do you postulate that's because now you are even more in control and closer to these nukes than you've ever been? As far as, your Navy career and being on these subs, is the timing there and your position having anything to do with that, do you think?
So, yeah, it's like going back to when I first discovered talk radio, reading the book Communion. These are the other things that just started. So again, just to say that there was no nuclear weapons on these missiles at this point. They're test missile candidates, but they are an operational system. And if something is happening, yeah, it could be. I did postulate that because I was a mean missile man. I wanted to know everything about that thing. I hung out with the Lockheed engineers. They had big drawings on the wall. Instead of going out and drinking beer, I would be over there studying it. I just want to know. And I qualified early as a supervisor at an E5, which, you had to get a waiver because you were supposed to be an E6. But, I did so well, the captain let me go through the program. And there was always these, what they call heavies. If you had one heavy on any type or what you were qualifying, a launch station, and this was, the instrumentation launch position. If you had one heavy, you were guaranteed to fail. Well, I was so confident, and not to be arrogant, I was just confident because I loved it. I actually loved learning about the system. I took all the heavies, invited them all to my board, and I passed. Now, I had like 35 lookups, but I passed for all the heavies. So I remember after that, and then after I started to do some launches as a supervisor, I remember the captain, he said, "You're a walking security violation," because I always had the answer for anything he needed or any of the officers needed. I had the answer right off the top of the head. So yeah, I did postulate that. Is this why? Because at this point, they really started to escalate at home. They started to get real bad. Whatever it was, I would wake up with the sleep paralysis. You'd try to scream. You could feel like there's something in the room or several somethings in the room. It was really scary times. I remember that. I started drinking beer more at this point because it escalated because I couldn't sleep. So I would use alcohol to help me sleep. That's how bad it got.
Now, you were sleeping at home every night at this point, or you did have tours where you'd go out and be gone for a certain amount of time on the sub?
So when you converted the rocket and you'd take that boat out because you were not part of the crew, you would go out there to man the launch set. So you would go out for a few days. And when I was out, nothing. And I would volunteer. So you had 3 shifts there in O2. And depending on what shift got done converting the rocket ready for launch, they would take it out to launch it. But if their supervisor or one of their instrumentation operators didn't want to do it, I'd volunteer to go see in second. For 2 reasons. I absolutely loved that job. And the second reason was I knew nothing was going to happen while I was out there. Kind of crazy.
It is interesting, though. And that is something that you put, like, yeah, I was wondering if being part of the sensitive program had to do with the events escalating. And of course they weren't live nukes, but really that was the last step for these systems before they would be then converted into live nukes, correct? Is that basically what I'm getting at?
So yeah, the whole purpose. Yeah, and you can look this. I'm comfortable talking about this because I know you can look it up. There's two types of programs: the FCET program and the DASO. So, FCET is called Fleet Combat Exercise Training. So that's when you would take a submarine, you would send them a message on patrol and say, "Hey, come in," and then of course they'd be happy because they come in halfway through patrol, and then we would convert two of the missiles. We just pick any two because this does test the multiple things. It tests that any weapon we pick can be instrumentated out and go down range. We show the Russians or any enemies that our weapons work. So that was one program. And then when you had another one, when in the 90s we were still having Ohio class subs being built. I remember the Wyoming was a brand new boat, and it came when they come out, you do what they call a DASO, and it's more, they monitor more things, so you put more instrumentation type gear on there. That's called a demonstration and shakedown operation, I believe it's called. So, and I did two British submarines as well. And I don't remember if those were. I think one was a DASO, the other one might have been an FCET. So this was a chance for the crew. So after we would spin it up and we made sure all the instrumentation and we can read it before it left the boat, we get permission to launch, and then the boat would go into their actual nuclear weapons release protocols. So it gave them a chance. This is how it works, and this is what it feels like in real life. So yes to your question, with a long drawn-out answer, of course.
No, that's okay. That's fascinating. I just wasn't sure if it had a whole bunch of more steps to go, or if you guys were kind of like the last check mark before these things were armed. So that's fascinating. I could see where that kind of work could get really addictive because you're just constantly learning and seeing new places. And like he called you the walking violation. I think that's hilarious because you were just...
Walking security violation?
Yeah, walking security violation, yeah. Because you were trying to be an encyclopedia.
Being part of any part, like what they're doing with SpaceX, completely amazing. Mm-hmm. But being part of any program out there, working on rockets is addictive, and I can't explain it. I've been in network communications for 20 years, and certainly I enjoy that job, but it's nothing like working on a rocket. So there's two different feelings, because there's hundreds of thousands of processes that have to come together to have before you light up that first engine and goes into space. Right. And then on its way up, it has to perform all these different functions. So it's just amazing to be a part of any of those programs, period.
Well, it's just like, watching Apollo 13, I always loved that movie, the one with Tom Hanks and Kevin Bacon and all those guys. I can watch that over and over, and it's just fascinating how many things have to go absolutely perfectly right, or you were in a whole lot of trouble. So this kind of stuff fascinates me. Space and military stuff, all of that is incredible. So, Mark, you were in for 12 years. You did 12 years of service, and unfortunately, things were.
I wanted to add one thing to what
ahead.
You just said. I remember it was one of the last launches we went out there. I remember because we as a division, we called ourselves the Love Division. I mean, we just all worked well together. Kind of dumb, but that's what we called ourselves. But I remember saying, "Hey guys, remember this because you're never ever going to be able to do this again in your lifetime.
Right.
Just remember this feeling. Remember what you're doing." Just to add on, with that Apollo 13 spin that you just said.
Right. Like even though they went through however many hours and days of hell, I bet they look back on it and they're like, I'm still glad that I went,
Yeah. Yeah, you are. Even if it's something bad, you're glad you went. It's just something about being part of those programs, any of those spaceborne programs.
Well, and actually what you just said ties into kind of the last thing that we're going to talk about as far as your portion in the service and how that ended and, how it all kind of came to an end for you in 98 after an unfortunate car accident.
Yeah, so I was on the way to work. It was in early morning. So this is just when cell phones were coming out. Those old flip phones. The very archaic flip phones. So there was this road where I'd have to cross before I got on 95 heading south that went to the high school. That's where my kids went to high school too. But he pulled out in front of me and I T-boned him, and I think I got slowed down to around 40 miles an hour or so before I hit him. So it was pretty violent. I remember felt like I passed out for a little bit. I mean, I didn't pop out of my body like some people did, but I remember passing out and then coming to, and I was out of the car, up by the front wheel and saying I couldn't breathe. I remember people, there was other people who had cell phones or calling 911s, and I remember the sirens coming. But I felt like I was just going to die. I had my seatbelt on and everything. The airbag hit me. I know it was so violent. The guys said they went and looked at my car after it got towed to the where the place they fix it, the body shop. They said they found my NASA badge, or it was a Cape Canaveral badge. They said it was in tiny little pieces where the seatbelt was over it. Wow. That's how violent the hit was. So, so it got to the No. 2 command, and all the guys, I think not just my division, I mean, officers and chiefs, everybody came to the emergency room, to check me out in the morning. And of course, they notified my wife at the time. So everybody gets in there, and I remember they're all in their whites, the Navy Top Gun whites and stuff, and they see I'm starting to feel better, but it's hard to breathe when your sternum was fractured, and I also fractured some vertebrae in my back as well. So these guys are starting to make me laugh, and I remember one of them said, "Put beer in his IV, he'll be okay." And at that point, that's when they all got escorted out and thrown out. But that was, but those guys really took care of me. They checked on me. I didn't come back to the command for 2-3 months while I was recovering. They stopped by the house, talked with me, checked on me, and I think I put in an email what happened when I came back. Somewhat recovered. I wasn't fully recovered, but I remember coming back, and those guys gave me a standing ovation when I walked in, and made me all teary-eyed and stuff, and because they were just happy to see me. We were and people could say this about any branch in the military, especially if people have been serving in combat. Well, these are the best friends you'll ever have the rest of your life. It's just you can't explain it. You have regular friends, but these military friends, I mean, it's like a extra family. Sometimes more family than your real family,
right?
If you will.
Yeah, I love military.
So at that point,
sorry, go ahead, Mike.
But no, I was going to say, I mean, at that point, I was so broke up. I mean, it was so violent. So the first thing that happened, I got disqualified submarines because if you fracture your sternum, you can't climb up and down the ladder to get out of the boat. And then I just couldn't fully recover. I remember my captain got me an extra. You only get one medical review board, but my captain had a lot of pull, and he got me another one. I think it was out of Charleston, and wasn't. They also denied me. At that point, I was medically separated, which was not. I wanted to be in the Navy for 50 years. I mean, I certainly didn't want to get out at that point. But that's what happened. That was the end of my Navy career and began my civilian life.
Which you said was very difficult for you, of course, which is not a surprise to transition from all of that, and now you're all of a sudden you're just a regular Joe like the rest of us.
Yeah, and I think that happens for anybody, because I remember, I mean, literally for a year, you wake up, you feel like you're supposed to be at quarters at 6:30 in the morning, or you're supposed to be PT. You feel like you have to be somewhere all the time, like you're responsible to be somewhere else. When you're a civilian, you're not responsible to be anywhere. I mean, you don't even have to show up to your job if you don't want to. You'll get fired, but you don't have to show up, if you get what I'm saying. So, yeah, it was hard to transition. So at this point, too, getting back to the events, they did start to slow down at this point during this 2-year transition. So
now they slowed down, which is good, of course, because I'm sure. Did that cross your mind though? So once you're discharged, you're going, oh my goodness, but the only time I sleep is when I'm on a sub. So how is this going to work out for me? I mean, did that cross your mind? So I mean, I'm thinking more, from now back, because I remember at that time the agony of getting discharged early and having my career taken away was the main thing on my mind. So I probably didn't. I mean, those events were happening, but I wasn't really putting them, in, as part of what was going on. I mean, the main thing is I didn't want to be out of the Navy, of course. Yeah.
So, I mean, I did start looking into it, whether it was psychosomatic or what these scientists are saying, or was it a real event? Who knows? All I know is it did start to calm down, and then that's when I got a job at Sprint, and it was that's when I got into communications, and this is a massive switch site which is out in Central Florida, what they call the Deseret Ranch. It's owned by the Mormon Church. So somehow Sprint I don't know how they got land out there, but it's a big building, and that's where all the voice and data communications, they're still there. But I learned a lot. I mean, it was it was kind of like a submarine because it's no windows and it's just rows and rows and rows of communications gear, and it kind of fitted in, and that helped me pull out of the drama of being discharged from the military. I kind of had something similar to what I was used to work on and learn. I mean, it was lots to learn, but I'm thankful that I did get hired on with Sprint, because I just got hired on to start wiring, and I remember I was troubleshooting one bay, just doing ground isolation. So because of seawater, grounded equipment was a problem all the time. So there was this new bay of equipment, and I just started taking Amphenol connectors again, and I was just doing ohms check, and I found out which card and which backplane it was in. And at the time, I was just a contractor. The manager brought me up because, "You want a job?" Because all my senior switch techs, none of them know how to do what you just did. So that's what started my career. So I was thankful that, I got hired on with them and was able to proceed on with life, because I had to raise my kids at this point. And it kind of worked out. I kind of look at it because my kids were becoming teenagers at this point, and they needed a dad at home. So but the events started, they would come and go, but they were bad, still bad, but not as bad as No 2, if you would, when I was there. So I didn't mention too, I mean, from the time I was a little kid, I slept with a pillow over my head, and I was still doing that, and how like you're hiding from something.
Right.
I don't know I'm sure other people do it, but you feel like you're hiding from whatever that event or whatever is happening.
Absolutely.
Is happening.
It's
like the pillow's going to protect you.
Well, I was just going to say, you hear it all the time. People use pillows, or they'll hide under the blankets, and, it's just that mental safety. There's no way it's going to help you, but darn it all if you're not going to try, Now, Mark, did you want to talk? Yeah, did you want to save the sighting for edition 2 as far as what you saw out at Deseret Ranch, or would you like to include that in this one?
This one I can collaborate is that. Now, I'm not going to say it's an alien spacecraft, but it was just an unexplained aerial phenomenon. So the ranch was out there by the Orlando International Airport, so you could hear the planes coming and going clear as day. You can hear their engines revving up or decelerating, landing or taking off. So this thing came in low, and there was a guy that I worked with that was a Marine. So we were just standing out. It was like midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning. And all of a sudden we look up and we see one red light. And then it was moving real slow just across the trees. I mean, maybe, how many yards would I say that was out there? Maybe it felt like it was only 300-400 yards away from us. And it was just cruising along silently. And then I looked up to the left. I could hear a plane over there. I could hear that, but I couldn't hear this thing. And then we saw a second red light. And it kind of looked like a huge superstructure. Couldn't really make out what it was, but it was something. So at this time, I'm listening to Art Bell on Conspiracy, and he mentioned that UFO reporting site. So since I had a collaborative witnesses that saw the same thing I did, I went in there and I logged it. So if you look up Deseret Ranch UFO sighting, you might see. I tried looking for it the other day. I couldn't find it, but it happened in 2001. I think March of 2001. And I wrote down all the details because, you write down the details when it happens. I mean, now it's been 20 years. It's hard to remember exactly. But I remember I did a full report on what was happening. And I said, I have a witness. I saw whatever this was. I don't know what it was, but I have a witness that saw it with me.
So March 2001, and you say it's not New Fork, the National UFO Reporting Center. It was just called the Reporting Center back then?
I think it might have been MUFON or one of those.
Because I'm going to try to look for that as well. Because I
remember you used to be able to just Google Deseret Ranch and right. UFO, and it would come right up. But now I think the algorithms are just not pulling it up anymore. It's been too long.
Right.
But yeah, I'm sure it's still out there. It has to be out there because they even commented on it. They wrote something like it was conspiracy with the Mormon Church and something to do with Joseph Smith. I don't know why they put that.
That's too bad. Just because you happen to be out at Deseret Ranch, right? They're just like, oh, it's a Mormon thing. You're like, no. You and a coworker saw this. What did the coworker say?
We were both just flabbergasted. We couldn't believe it. I mean, because we were pointing at it, like, is that a superstructure? And I said, it kind of looks like. Again, we're both military, but we've been trained to do visual observations. And I'm like, we're just trying to make it was quiet, didn't make a sound.
How big was it?
Just cruising along above the tree line, and you can hear planes, plain as day, out around it.
How big was it? Would you say, if you could guess?
Oh man, it was. the superstructure looked like it was it looked like an aircraft carrier. I mean, a couple football fields long. It was crazy. Yeah. It was something else. I will add in Lockheed Martin. They don't use this site anymore, but they had a testing site out there as well. And you could see it if you go on Google Maps. So if you look up Wee-Wahooty Road in Orlando, you can see where the Sprint switch site is. And if you go out east, you can see where the old Lockheed train. Because it's not blacked out. You could see it. But I think that's where, because my dad mentioned that because he ended up working for Lockheed Martin and for the Lantern system on the F-16, and I think they later put it on Apache. That's where they did testing for some of these. At the time, they were secret weapon systems. I mean, now they're outdated, and who knows what they have now. But I mean, so there was that out there. So could our government have been testing something? Possibly. I don't know.
I'm still waiting to, even if I don't. Like you said, you keep repeating this, and I think it's important. You don't know if it's an alien spacecraft or if it's our government or what it is. Like, you're not putting a label on anything. You're just saying, well, that was weird. I'm still waiting to see something like that in the sky. I would love to see something the size of an aircraft carrier and go, holy smokes, I am, and just be blown away by something that large in the sky. How long did you guys see that for?
Oh, it was... 2 to 3 minutes or
so.
I mean, it kind of just cruised by, and we just watched it. It didn't blink out. It didn't go shoot straight up like you hear some. It just kept going across the tree line until it got out of sight. Because there's just a lot of trees because it's swamp area, so it just got to where we couldn't see it anymore. I mean, it was too big to be a blimp, and the lights weren't blinking. They were just on. There was 2 red lights, and they were just on. And there wasn't like the green and red navigational lights. None of that. I just saw the red light. That was it. And it was going from west to east, going towards the beach. That's how it was traveling.
They were out there just to pick up some of the skunk apes. They're just interested in those skunk apes out there. That's all.
Yeah, well, that's something we can mention. And I got a story about that.
Yeah.
Maybe we can, in part 2, we can talk about that.
Oh, I can't wait. Yeah.
Yeah, because I used to razz the guys that worked out Sprint because it was a 6-mile drive out to the Sprint switch site. We had to use 4-wheel drives because it was down a dirt road. And I'd always be razzing those guys or watch out for the skunk ape because there was a gate you had to stop at and open at midnight in the dark. And yeah, so Matt, that's another conversation we can bring up later. But I mean, to end the story, just to throw another spin on all this, like saying that when I was on the boat, I was safe. So I grew up. Consequently, I did grow up in a Mormon church. So I didn't go to church when I was in the military, but I went back. Part of me regaining myself and my identity because I wasn't in the military. The church had certainly been coming over and encouraging me to go to church because when I lived out there on the coast. But I finally did go to church full time. And when I started going to church full time, and this is not, hey, join a Mormon church. I'm just telling you, when I went to church, the events almost completely stopped. I have them occasionally, once in a while, some kind of sleep paralysis. But does religion have something to do with it? I don't specifically say it's the Mormon church, but is there a religious aspect to it? Is it evil? Evil versus good. Could it be on that thing? There's just so many variables you can think about.
And they don't like water. They don't like submarines for whatever reason. Which is so fascinating. That part of it, I don't know that I've heard something quite like that. That's why I find it extremely interesting. So,
the whole thing's crazy. But that's really about the end of the story. I mean, I'm happily married to a nice Spanish woman, and things are okay now. I got remarried in 2014. I don't sleep with a pillow over my head anymore. Hopefully after this broadcast, I don't start having events.
Yeah, I hope not
that crossed my mind yesterday. This is going to get out there. Next thing you know, it's going to start happening again. But I'll let you know if it does.
I thought about that too, and I certainly hope that is not the case. I did think about that myself, especially after I read all the things that we were going to be talking about. But yeah, let's hope not. Well,
I'm just wondering what's happening with everybody else and all the other stories you heard and all the other stories out there.
Right.
Just my story is just another one. There's a couple twists in there that probably nobody's heard before. I just wonder if that adds to solving whatever it is. It could just be psychosomatic sleep paralysis, and if that's what it is, fine. But it does make it interesting. I think there's a lot more going on in this world than what people can't really see. I definitely think there's a lot of things going on out there.
Absolutely. And that's why I thank you and everybody else that's willing to come on. As I say, it's like going fishing. You got to throw the line out there. And that's why I like to have these stories that have their own little twists and turns, as you said, because sometimes those are the things that spark people to get in contact or, make a report or whatever it might be that their next step needs to look like. So, well, Mark, thank you so much for coming on for edition 1. We are going to execute edition 2 very soon. And I promise, guys, you're going to want to tune in for that because there's a whole lot more information and a lot of it's tied into, of course, what we just spoke about. But I just thought it was important to get his military background and all of the different things that he's been through in the latter part of his life. And we're going to cover the rest on edition 2. So make sure to tune in.
Well, I'm so-and-so. I was given this name by my parents. I've been to such and such a college. I've done these things in my profession. I produce a little biography. Buddha says, forget it. That's not true. That's some story. That's all gone. That's all past. I want to see the real you are now. Well, nobody knows who that is. Because we don't know ourselves except through listening to our echoes and consulting our memories. But then there's a real you, and that again leads us back to this question. Who are you? That is the real you. We shall see how they play with this exam by the koans to get you to come out of your shell and find out who you really are. as when you settle down in the train to read your newspaper and so on. You are not the same person who a little while ago left the platform. If you think you are linking your moments up in a chain. And this is what binds you to the wheel of birth and death. But when you know that every moment in which you are is the only moment, this comes into Zen. A master will say to somebody, get up and walk across the room. And he comes back and he says, where are your footprints? They've gone. So where are you? Who are you? When we are asked who we are, we usually give a kind of recitation of a history.